Today I'm interviewing Dr. Sara Walker. Dr. Walker has long been engaged with the American College of Physicians. She became a fellow in 1973, was Missouri governor from 1991 to 95, during which time she won the Missouri Laureate Award. She was elected to mastership in 1996, the same year she became a regent, and was the third woman president of the American College of Physicians and American Society of Internal Medicine in 2002. For those of you who are too young to remember this, that's following the merger for several years. The college was called by both names before it reverted to the back to its original name of American College of Physicians. So tell me a little bit about your early life. Where were you born and where did you grow up and what did your folks do?
I was born in Navasota, Texas, 1939, and grew up in Hempstead, Texas, a small town 50 miles northwest of Houston. My dad was the doctor. He had graduated from the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston and went to work. For years, especially during World War II, he was the only physician in Hempstead and in Waller County. So he was essentially on call 24 hours, 7 days a week for years. He did have a partner, but that doctor was drafted into the Army. So he left my dad all by himself. My dad was not drafted because he had fought in World War I. So he was free from the draft, but was on constant duty. And I well remember at night, we would be in the house and there would be a soft knock at the back door in the middle of the night, and a soft voice would call Dr. Walker, Dr. Walker, and he was needed. Some of these were, he called baby cases. All the babies were delivered at home. So he was quite an inspiration for me. I thought I would like to be a doctor too. I enrolled in the University of Texas in Austin, where I was privileged to be chosen as one of the 100 students entering Plan 2. Plan 2 was a liberal arts program. It was wonderful. It was my first introduction. Having gone to a very small high school, it was my first introduction to learning a foreign language. And the university had very thoughtfully provided a wonderful scholar to teach us that, Mr. Shattuck. So I had great teachers, loved it. I did go to school there for 2 summers. So I was able to complete both the Plan 2 liberal arts requirements and the science courses required for pre-medical to get into medical school. So then I entered the same school my dad had attended, UT Medical Branch. I believe it was the first medical school established in Texas.
It was.
It had been established in this port city because I was told the feeling was that all of the commerce and the ships going back and forth would bring in lots of exotic diseases for us students to study. And that's true. I mean, we saw yellow fever, Chagas disease,
Wow.
many other sexually transmitted disease the sailors brought. But I won't go into too much detail there, but we certainly saw a variety.
Didn't they also have the state prison hospital there in Galveston as well?
Not at that time.
Ah.
Not at that time. I know that the faculty and students did go to a nearby prison, especially the plastic surgeons. They did a lot of work in the prisons. They felt if they could help correct the facial deformities, that the prisoners might have a better chance once they got to the outside.
Hmm.
I wasn't allowed to go on these trips because I was a woman.
Safety? Were they worried about your safety, or?
That's what they said. But so I didn't go. But later I did have, when I was an intern in Philadelphia, I had some experience in prisons. 6 of us women entered the freshman class. 2 of us graduated 4 years later, along with 142 men. So women were considered quite a curiosity there. That wasn't that long ago, Dan. I graduated in 1964. Well, was it the modern era or not? Not yet, huh?
No, I think Title IX made the difference, right? I entered, and there were 8 women in my class of 108.
Yeah.
4 years later, when I graduated in 1974, the incoming class was over 40% women.
Yeah, we're seeing that, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so it's quite a difference. I think the attitude toward women is better now. I certainly hope so. I did not find my male classmates at all welcoming. They were not glad that a woman was going to be a doctor. No, I would say almost universally, they felt I was taking the place of a qualified man, and I didn't belong there. And anyway, they assured me over and over I would not graduate. Or if I did graduate, I might be lucky enough to get married, and then I'd be a housewife. So just the same, I persevered. I was glad to graduate. Now I wanted to do an internship where I would get plenty of clinical experience. So I chose the Philadelphia General Hospital. And that was an amazing experience. You know, a big city hospital that no longer exists, a very old general hospital. So it was across the street from the University of Pennsylvania Medical School. I had my first exposure to rheumatology there. There were rheumatologists at Penn, and they would come over and round on our patients. So Dr. McCarthy himself, a great teacher in rheumatology who helped, he wasn't the initial discoverer, but he helped us understand the pathogenesis of gout by identifying the crystals under a microscope using polarized light. So he's a great man. He also published several books on rheumatology. So that I was kind of standing around the corner listening to these erudite rheumatologists from the great medical school. And this was my patient they were rounding on. And one of them opened the chart, and Dr. McCarthy said, "Oh, this is a good write-up." Well, I felt, what can I say? I just felt wonderful. Well, one of the first clinical rotations I had there was on gynecology. I had a month on obstetrics, a month on gynecology. It was a true rotating general internship. And although later I would go into an internal medicine residency, I only had 2 months on internal medicine. I had orthopedic surgery, emergency room, many different things. But when I was in charge of a ward that had 30 gynecology patients in it. And the first patient, I was being shown around by the attending. He took me over to a lady who had pus running out from between her legs. I'd never seen anything like that. He said, this is a result of a failed abortion. And many of our patients had to be admitted because they had the life-threatening septic abortions. Some performed by their own mothers who wanted the daughter to have a chance to go on with her schooling. Another thing interns were required to do on that rotation was to go out to the homes. If a woman had an unexpected premature delivery in her home, she had the right to call the Philadelphia Hospital, General Hospital, I'm sorry. Yeah, Philadelphia General, and ask them to send out a doctor who was the intern. So I made a number of trips. First, a police car would go into the apartment and certify that no one was there and that it was safe. And then I would arrive in an ambulance with an armed guard, and he would accompany me into the home. And sometimes the poor baby was so unexpected. It was just wrapped in nothing but a bath towel. And we would take the mother and the infant, living or dead, not all of them survived, back to the hospital for care. After 1 year in Philadelphia, I moved to Houston. I wanted to be closer to my family and took residency in internal medicine at Baylor University College of Medicine. I was under the guidance of Dr. Herb Fred. I don't know if you ever met Dr. Fred.
Never did. The prominent internists I know from Houston that are probably about your age, Herb DuPont and a few others.
Yes. Dr. Fred is no longer with us. Unfortunately, he passed away about a year ago. He was the strictest, most stern chief of medicine. He was chief of medicine at Bentob General Hospital, which was a big part of the Baylor teaching program. We had to show up at 7 a.m. every morning, having rounded on our patients and having personally done a urinalysis and a blood count on each of our patients. Well,
did you have a little lab right next to the ward there that you did your studies on?
Yes, we did. And if you had a new patient and had not looked at that patient's urine and blood, you only did that once. It was only done once. So he was extremely strict and stern. He was a perfectionist. He wanted us to know everything about the patient. And although it was an exhausting experience, I really believe I benefited from that. If one passed through such an onerous and difficult time, it gave me a great deal of confidence. And I love Dr. Fred. I think he was a great man. But that was his style of teaching.
Were you functioning as sort of a medical intern at this point, an internal medicine PGY1, we would call them now?
That's right.
And so
Yes.
what was your work week like? What was your call schedule like and your work week like?
Well, it depended on the year and the service. The first year, we were, for at least 6 months of that first year, we were on call every other night. The second year and third year, we were more into subspecialty work. And we would be on call every third or fourth night. We still took general medicine call, although we might be rotating on, say, hematology or neurology. I don't mourn over that. I felt it was extremely strenuous, but this was what I wanted to do. This is what I fought my way through medical school, through all of my male classmates. I finally graduated. This was what I wanted to do, and it gave me great joy to do this. Nothing pleased me more than to go into the emergency room and have poor people come trying to get medical care. They didn't have any other place to go. It pleased me enormously to give them at least the best care I was able to. Now, in the emergency room, I think I had a total of 3 months as a medical resident at Baylor. And this was in the Ben Taub Charity Hospital emergency room. And so for half of that time, I was on 12 hours in the day, 12, and then go home 12 hours at night, and on 12 and off 12. And for the second half of that time, I was on night duty. And I'd go home and sleep during the day. But I loved it. I loved it. One of the surgery residents who was working down there had previously taken some training in internal medicine. I remember him very well. So Warren decided he was going to help me out. So I was in the room reserved for internal medicine patients. And I will say many of these patients came in florid congestive heart failure. So one night Warren came in, he said, "Sara, I'm going to help you. I'm in internal medicine." And I literally planted my foot on his behind. And it was undignified. But hey, I said, "No, Warren, no, this is my patient." Got him out of there and slammed the door after him. He was really a good guy, though, Warren. So that was part of the residency. Yeah. Well, I had trouble, actually some trouble beginning my residency because I'd only had 2 months of rotation as an internship in medicine, and I needed help. I did. And some of the senior residents helped me. And finally, after about a month, I started to figure out what I was doing, and things were better.
Can I just ask you, it sounds like you were perhaps socially isolated and unsupported in medical school. Did you feel alone and friendless? Were there any people that were nice to you?
Well, in medical school, the women, there were about 12 or 15 women in the different classes. And we knew each other, and some of us stayed in the same dormitory. And we would occasionally go out to eat together. There didn't seem to be much time for a lot of socialization. But for me, there was the men, I was, never invited to anything social by them. That was considered, you don't want to help a woman become a doctor. She's an outcast. That's really the way I felt.
Was it any better during residency?
I knew the other women residents. The men were a little friendlier and more accepting, but I can't say I had a great social life. It seemed like the more I advanced in my training, the more I was accepted and had a chance to make friends. So then when I went to my fellowship, we weren't on call every night. We had some call, but that was great. That gave more time. That's where I met Don Kay, my first husband. We were fellows together. We were both first-year fellows. So we were married 2 years later. After we met the first day of fellowship training. 2 years later, we were married, and our son was born there in Ann Arbor. So that suited me well. I liked it there. Yeah.
Why did you leave? What got you to leave Ann Arbor and go to Columbia?
We weren't advancing in our careers the way we wanted to. We thought we'd have a better chance in another school. At that time, Bill Kelly came in.
Yep.
Chair of medicine. And he wanted all of his faculty members to have 2 ongoing grants at the level of an NIH grant. We didn't have that. We both got grant support, but we only had 1 grant. And I wanted to do some research. I think Bill might have kept us on as strictly clinical doctors, which is fine. We like that, but I wanted to do some research. So we started looking at different places and we liked Columbia very much. Gordon Sharp had established an outstanding rheumatology program. At that time, we had fellows from all over the country, and we liked it there.
What job did you were you chief of rheumatology when you came?
No, Gordon was chief.
I see.
I was chief of rheumatology at the VA hospital, which is a good hospital, and it's right across the street from the medical school. And at that time, it was considered almost an extension of the university hospital. Now I think it might be a little bit more isolated with all its own faculty and attendings. Yes, I liked it, and I did have a research laboratory. My research centered on the effects of estrogen and prolactin in the activity of lupus. The idea was that these predominantly female hormones are able to activate the immune system and could contribute to the severity and activity of SLE.
So I want to just circle back a little bit to residency. You know, there's, you know, as you may know, I was a residency program director for quite a while, and you know, there's been an evolution in the workload and the duty hours and so on, and I think that's a good thing, and I think you know, I think I was damaged a little bit by my training in terms of stress, and I think it would be facile to call it PTSD, but certainly, you know, I think it was a very stressful and strenuous time in residency when you were a resident, and even when I was a resident. Do you have feelings about that? Do you feel you got adequate support? Do you think that was there any kind of help for you, or you know, anything to kind of help you deal with the stresses and strains of your residency?
No, I don't think there was not the recognition that there is now, that this extreme stress can damage you. I think for me, the most damaging aspect of all of my training was, might have been medical school. Actually, for me, you know what, if I'm going to ruminate about something in a time when I was very unhappy and unappreciated, for me, it was middle school and high school.
Really?
Yes, I was in a small class in high school. I think 30 of us graduated. And you either fell in with the in crowd or no one would speak to you. And I felt that I was really a pariah. That's what I ruminate about. I loved undergraduate studies at Texas. Medical school was fine. Yes, I didn't have a lot of friends, but I didn't feel that I needed a lot of friends. And my parents only lived 100 miles away from medical school. I could always talk to them and saw them on holidays, but for me, it was high school. It really, and I think of it to this day, Dan, of being actively excluded from just about every activity, every possible friendship. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I grew up in a town where I graduated from a high school of 20 kids in rural Nebraska, and you know, one of my colleagues grew up in a similar small town in southern Ohio, and I think he had an experience more similar to yours, where he basically was very isolated. I said about both of us, it was like we were aliens that had been dropped into these areas, you know, because there was virtually nobody like us that had similar kinds of interests. But the difference was I learned to pass. You know, I learned to I don't know, fit in a little bit better by suppressing, you know, some of my interests and so on.
Oh.
And I don't think he ever, or not letting them show. I don't think he ever did. And so I kind of understand what you're talking about, although I didn't experience it to the extent that you did. So, but it's high school is a very cruel time to begin with, I think.
Yes.
I think if, as you were, I'm sure you were out on the, you know, 2.5 percentile of the far end of the bell curve, and you know, it put you quite a distance from the middle in terms of your intelligence and your interests and so on.
Well, yes. And thanks for mentioning that. The feeling in my high school was that if a female is going to succeed, she'll first get a boyfriend and then she'll get married right after she graduates.
Yeah.
That's success. This other reading books, grades, thinking you're so, quote, she thinks she's so smart. I can still hear those cruel words today.
Mm.
But once I got out of there and got into college, I mean, university and medical school. That's what I've been craving.
Sure. The University of Texas was, I'm sure, is, and I'm sure was a wonderful place.
It was wonderful. In Plan 2, we were a select group. 100 people were chosen every year. It was like an honors liberal arts. And the professors were stupendous. I had Ralph Eugene Alston. Oh, Doctor, I worshiped this guy. He was wonderful. He was one of the great botanists of the last century. The American Botany Association, he's passed away, has established a scholarship in his name. I mean, these were super teachers, and I just loved it. I was happy. I'm sure my studies, a lot of it took the place of a social life. I was too tall. I was 5 feet, 11 and a half inches tall. So that did not make me a candidate to pledge any of the upper sororities. No.
Was Greek life important at the University of Texas?
I think it was. Yes. The student leaders, yes, got into the right sorority or fraternity. It was a great place to meet people you would need to know for the rest of your professional life. I think it was important. It wasn't everything, but it was pretty important. I'm almost happier at the age of 80. I know I am. I'm happier at the age of 80 than I was at 16.
Well, you know, if you want to think of it that way, you've made it into all the best fraternities now.
Oh, yes, thank you. You know, it took a while.
You know, success comes at different points in life for different people. So,
yes.
So, could you tell me a little bit about what you think about the arc of your career and your ability to help patients and how it's changed? You know, maybe during the time you were practicing, what changed in rheumatology and, you know, what you felt about that?
Well, in rheumatology, I see changes all for the better. And they have to do with the development of new science-based treatments. I'm amazed at what people can do now. When I started rheumatology, the treatment for rheumatoid arthritis, devastating and terribly painful disease, as I know you know, consisted of high-dose aspirin, as much as the patient could tolerate, and injections of gold salts, a toxic and maybe not very effective therapy. That's all we had to offer. And we saw people who were curled up like a shrimp. Every joint was flexed. They couldn't stand up. Now, if the disease can be detected early and treated appropriately by a rheumatologist often, they can go back to work. I'm not saying it can be cured, but boy, you can stop it in its tracks. Well, that's a miracle. Gout, which at the beginning, gout is a terrible disease. You talk about pain. So gout, over the years, people like Dr. McCarty taught us how to diagnose it and how to treat it. And I think we've made real progress there. The disease I would like to see more progress in is lupus. It's still a devastating, unbelievably painful, debilitating disease when it's in its full form for young women. you just don't like to see it.
I'm curious, I'm interested in your thoughts about this. Of course, I trained on the East Coast and then spent the bulk of my career in the middle of the country. And so the really severe lupus I saw was mostly in African American women. And then when I got to Las Vegas for a few years, I saw terrible, devastating lupus in Hispanic women. And I'm curious, why do you think it seems to be disproportionately so severe in those two minority communities?
I'm not sure it is. I'm just not sure it is. I know it's terrible. The legend is that our African American sisters get a worse cases. I do not know, someone may know, but I don't know if it's because they just don't have access to early diagnosis.
Well, that's what I was
Or they
wondering.
get renal failure. Huh? I don't
That's
know.
what I was wondering. I wondered if it was healthcare disparities or whether it was genetic. I was interested in your opinion.
I'm very concerned about the disparities. If someone will fix the disparities, then we can look at the genetics. But what you say is true, and we've seen really tragic cases, but I've also seen tragic cases in young white women who are red-haired or blonde and don't have much pigment in their skin. Yeah, so that's a disease. Although many of us worked on it, good people have been working on it for years. I don't think we're not where we need to be.
So let me ask you a little bit about your involvement in the college. How did you become involved in the college, and then tell me a little bit about your involvement in the college over the years.
I was told to join.
Oh, really? By whom?
I tried. It was, oh dear, who's that darling? By Dr. Tom Burns.
Ah, yeah, sure.
Yes. When I started at the University of Missouri, each section had an outstanding leader, and Dr. Burns was just one of the best. So he came up to me one day. I was very young attending. He was senior attending. He said, I want you to join the American College of Physicians, Sara. Oh, okay. Yes, Dr. Burns. Yes. I'm glad for once in my life, I didn't take a negative attitude. When a man came up and told me to do something, no, Dr. Burns, I'm not going to treat Dr. Burns that way. He's just, you just obey. He was to be obeyed. And I did. And then nothing happened. And then I started going to meetings. At that time, we were having meetings for the Missouri chapter. We were meeting at Lake of the Ozarks. And I found the teaching to be exceptional. Now here at last, I was meeting people from other locations, from, in different practices. And that is very valuable to have input and association with others. So I liked it. And then I think I was on a committee, and then I just decided to go for it and run for governor. I'm so glad that happened, that I was elected governor, because then I could go to our national Board of Governors meetings and get to know governors from every state. Well, hey, that was wonderful too. So I did enjoy that. And I found, governors, they're not like people I'd known before who are going to say, why are you in medicine? No, they were very nice and accepting, like colleagues. Well, that meant a lot to me. It really did. And they're wonderful people, wonderful friends. So yeah, I love that.
So how did you did you run for, I don't know how it worked back in the 90s. Did you run for the Board of Regents?
I was nominated, I'm trying to remember that. I know there was a nomination process. I think a couple of governors in my class urged me to do this and wrote letters of nomination for me. That's how I remember it. And then they also supported me when I wanted to be on the Board of Regents and president. They were very supportive. They're wonderful guys and gals.
Do you recall who in particular, pushed you along?
I can't, this is terrible. No. Isn't that awful? I'm 81. That's my excuse.
I forget what I had for breakfast sometimes.
These darling people. It was wonderful. I thought they were very generous to do this. And then, being president, that was just wonderful because I got to travel all over. And I took that opportunity to join the National Medical Association. And I'm
Really?
still a member.
I'm surprised. I didn't know that you could join the National Medical Association.
Yes, anyone can join.
Interesting.
And it's meant a great deal to me. I have attended 2 of their national meetings. And I thought I wanted to draw them into the college and vice versa. Have people in the college interested in them and to attend their get-togethers, their meetings. So that meant a great deal to me. And I knew I was going, I went to one meeting in Nashville, and then I went to another meeting in Honolulu. Every 4th year or so, they were meeting in Hawaii. And so as president, I invented an award. I did that when I was governor too. I wanted to get more people to come to the meeting, so I invented awards and said, now you have to come to the meeting. We're giving you an award.
What was the award you invented?
I don't know. It's best trainer. I don't even remember what they were, but I know we gave, when I was governor, going back to Missouri, we invented an award for trainees, for residents. And somehow we chose 15 residents from the programs across the state and notified them they were getting an award. They all came. And at the meeting, we called them up to the stage, presented the awards. They were happy. We were happy. Residents were introduced to the college. And so the same thing happened at the National Medical Association meeting. Well, not exactly the same, in Honolulu. And the president of the NMA at that time was a woman. And she went up to the stage. They were going to have some sort of closed session. And she said, I want the room to be cleared of non-members. And then I said, uh-oh, she's talking about me. So I held up my membership card to show it to them. But I decided, if they're uncomfortable, I'll leave. I left. But anyway, before that happened, I was able to go up on the stage and present an award to one of their outstanding members. I don't know, it was the American College. That award no longer exists. It only existed one time. But I wanted to get the name of American College of Physicians in front of them to let them know I was happy to come to the meeting. They're not all African Americans. You know, there are people of other minorities who belong and they feel comfortable belonging to that organization.
Interesting. I wasn't aware that they allowed non-black membership. There's probably a story to be told there of the parallel organizations that exist. The local equivalent of the St. Louis Medical Society was called the Mound City Medical Society.
Oh.
Mound City, referring to the Mississippian mounds across the river.
Yes.
The early civilization that lived there. So that's fascinating. So, did your son become a doctor?
No. He told his dad and me he would never be a doctor. He said, "You work too hard." But I don't want to do that. He's an engineer. So I'm very proud of him. He's like an architectural engineer. He has to sign off before a building can be built. None of his buildings have fallen down, I'm glad to say.
That's good.
Ever so often you read that in Brazil or Mexico or whatever, or China, an entire building has collapsed. His job is to prevent that.
So, and towards the end of your career, and perhaps even later, if you were asked to speak to students, would you still advise them to become physicians?
Oh, yes.
And internists, to become an intern?
Oh, the best. You like to read a detective story? Yeah. Well, be this kind of detective. It's extremely satisfying. Figure out the mystery, solve the problem, put all of these little parts together and come out with a life-saving solution or a life-improving solution. Give people a better quality of life. I can tell you from my experience that being sick or going around with atrial fibrillation and a poor cardiac output, that's no fun. So I'm very happy with the new advances in medicine if we can give them to others or if we ourselves can take advantage of them. I'm saying this because I had ablation of my AV node.
Really?
2 days before Christmas. I had long-standing atrial fibrillation. I was miserable. I had a rapid ventricular response. I felt like I wasn't even alive. I couldn't think very well. And now that I've had the ablation, my heart rate, the machines in my shoulder set my heart rate at 70. And although I can't remember the names of these wonderful people who helped me in the past, I do feel like I'm thinking better.
Good.
I've gotten a bachelor's degree in art at
Really?
New Mexico State University since Paul and I moved here. I will
Really?
now show you some of my works.
I see the portrait above there. Who is that of?
Which one, the red one or the other one?
The black and white looks like charcoal maybe or pencil.
Yes, the black and white. She was an African-American congresswoman from Houston, a great leader in the civil rights movement. She was a great leader. I admire her very much.
What was her name?
Lady.
What was her name?
Oh, I'll have to send it to you, dear.
Okay.
This lady, I don't know if you can, let me turn the light on. This is the only woman to ever win the Medal of Honor, the red.
The red one?
Here we go.
Which branch of the service was she in?
She's in the Army in the Civil War.
Oh, really?
Yes, the war between the states. At that time, the medal was being handed out indiscriminately. And the feeling was, it's like almost anyone who wanted the Medal of Honor could get it. So the feeling was that she was one of those people, and she was asked to give it back. And of course she said no. I'll look up these names for you. See,
Okay, all right.
you gotta forgive me. But
That's
yes,
all right.
I loved it. Now I've got another picture up here on the wall. Oh,
So were you an artist before you got your art degree? Did you do this as a hobby or something?
I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in art with emphasis on drawing.
I see.
After that, I got a master's degree in art history. And I've just had a paper published based on my thesis. Let me show you. It's hang on. It's an art history magazine source.
Congratulations. What's it about?
The topic? What did you say? What was it about?
What's it about? What's the
Yes. It is about, look, Dan, you see that?
Yeah.
That is a photo reproduction of a famous letter attributed to Michelangelo. The letter, I call it the letter of 1542. And this is the title. See, I go by my first married name now, Sara Ellen Kay.
Right. Okay.
And Michelangelo probably dictated a letter in 1542 that is cited by many art historians as kind of proof that he was an enemy of Raphael. Well, it turns out I was the first person to publish a copy of the original letter. These last 4 lines are quoted over and over as Michelangelo is saying, Raphael, he's not much. And anyway, anything that Raphael learned about art, he learned it from me. How about that? But it turns out that Michelangelo did not write the letter. His secretary, Luigi del Riccio, whose handwriting I display here. Can you see it at all?
Yep.
Okay. Luigi did not transcribe this letter. It's written by an unknown scribe. So I enjoyed that. Of course, it took me 5 years to write it. It took forever.
Where did you find the letter? So you said the reproduction had never been published before.
That's right. People who wrote about it previously were working from a printed translation or from the letter that was taken and printed. I'm sorry, what was your question?
I was just wondering where you got the letter. Is it in an archive in Florence somewhere?
Well,
or?
what? No, I emailed the library where this letter is kept. And with the help of my Italian teacher, who lives in Italy, there is a way that you can request a paper from their files or a letter. You pay a small amount and it will be sent to you online. What you have to do is go through the Italian, it's like trying to get a COVID shot. You have to go through the mechanism. You have to call the right person. You have to request it in Italian. It took 3 months to get it, but I think Francesca called him on the phone finally and spoke with him in Italian. And sure enough, it had to be done in a very certain way. You had to pay them in a certain way, but we got the letter. Yeah, and then to find letters to compare to it, I went to the British Library. They were somewhat easier to understand on the phone.
In person or online?
Oh, I did both, but most of it was online. The British are so nice. Dan, they talk polite. Oh, and so I was able to, now, one of these, I don't think this one is, this is Michelangelo's handwriting. Mm-hmm. I don't think this particular letter has been published. Most people just republish the same old letter in his handwriting over and over and over because it's easy to do. But here I went directly to the library and they were very helpful. And, you know, it cost $19 to get this. So I was really quite thrilled.
Good. So I have a couple of last questions, and sort of speaking of COVID, if Biden fired Tony Fauci tomorrow and asked you to give him advice, what would be the single most important piece of advice you'd give him?
We need a national directive or law directing people to observe social distancing, but most important, to wear a mask anytime they step outside of their own door. This needs to be done nationally. When I go to Phoenix, I have a lot of medical work done there. We drive through Arizona. There are a couple of towns there where people don't wear any masks, even now. Do what you can do, even though it's simple. Don't use it as a political weapon. I would say that, and I would say let's get all people vaccinated. Don't leave out the school teachers. Don't leave them out. Their sacrifice is great.
All right. And penultimate question, do you have thoughts or observations about the lot of women in medicine today as compared to your early life experiences?
Well, I see it. It's improving and it's accepted. I would just like to see a national, I think, what do you think, Dan? Are we getting into a national feeling that women in research, scientific careers, medicine, are accepted equally with men? What do you know more than I do?
Well, it's hard to know. It's hard to know what's in people's hearts, but you know, I'm in a medical school now where the chair of medicine is a woman, Vicki Frazier.
Yes.
And the chair, recently recruited chair of OBGYN is a woman.
Yes.
And I would say for the first time in my life, at my local level, concerns regarding disparities in promotion and pay are being taken seriously and dealt with. I think that's fair to say. And certainly, I function as the chief of medicine at the VA. I function as a division chief in the Department of Medicine. And so I go to monthly meetings and recently every 2-week meetings because of COVID. And I would say that there's been a lot of discussion about the disparate impact of the epidemic on the careers of women scientists, you know, because and ways to address that, because with kids at home and homeschooling and so on, it's had a substantial impact on careers, on the ability to get grants renewed and so on. So I would say that it is better, but the work is not done. On a national level, I think one of the things I've learned is that we are a nation of very widely varying states, and the people in New Hampshire think and live very differently than the people in Vermont, for example, and the people in Nevada and Texas think and feel very differently about different things. And so I think that it's difficult to discuss a national attitude, because I think there are 50 national attitudes or more. So I'd say it's better, but it's not where it is. Now, the other thing that's happening, of course, is that women make up more than 50% of students in medical school now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as they move through the pipeline, and then it's already happening as the first cohort move through the pipeline, they're obtaining and being appointed to leadership positions. The number of women deans of medical schools has increased significantly. My medical school at Duke has had two women deans in two women deans in succession, and so I think it's better. I don't think it's equal. I'm reminded of Ginsburg's quote, when she was asked how many women it would take for how many women should be on the Supreme Court. She said 9. She said, it's been 9 men forever. Why shouldn't it be 9 women? So, or I'm paraphrasing words to that effect. So, people still think in terms of firsts. They still have to push for diversity and equity. And I think as long as you're having to push for it, then the work is not done. When it becomes automatic, then the work is complete. So anyway.
Oh, excuse me.
No, that's
I remember Vicki as a student.
Yeah.
When she was a student, would you please tell her hello for me?
Certainly, I sure will. And so I think it's better, but and it's certainly I think it was a different school, and it was 10 years later, but I think that there was much less hostility to women medical students in my cohort than there was in yours. And so anyway, all right. Well, let me ask you one last question. If you've had a long and fruitful and productive life, if you could do anything differently, what would it be?
I think I would just remember it's how important it is to have faith in yourself. No matter what others may say, believe in yourself. Don't let them beat you down. Well, maybe I've always felt that way. Okay, one thing I would do differently is take more time off for my husband and son. Yeah. Oh, I love my career. I felt I was on a trajectory, but what about them? I think I left them out. Yes. So that is important. And that's what you're getting at with the new way, or so with the way people are being given more time for their personal lives. And that is important, not only for the physician, but for the family. Yeah. I would change that. I really think I should have given them more time. Yeah.
Well, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Take care.
You too.